Randall's on the floor. Brady's blocked by Ben Wallace. Woo! Get out of the air. To try to win it. O'Neal deep on the post. Lots of contact there. Oh, what a block by Wallace. Wow. And a jump ball. Wow.
Big Ben.
Three rattles the cage. Ben Wallace the rebound, and man, did he jam it down with the right hand. Big Ben Wallace, 6'9", about 245, folks, out of Virginia Union. Woo!
He was one of the most feared big men and most intimidating defensive forces of his day.
It's Mourning for the hook. Ben Wallace with his 6th block shot tonight. An incredible defensive evening for Ben Wallace.
He'll go down as perhaps the greatest undrafted player in NBA history. From rags to riches, this is the story behind Ben Wallace. Ben Wallace was born September 10th, 1974 in Whitehall, Alabama, the 10th of 11 children to Sadie Wallace, a single mother who preached the value of hard work. She taught us to pray and be thankful for whatever we got, to realize that there's a difference in the feeling between the things that you work for and the things that somebody's given you. You appreciate the things you work for a whole lot more, Wallace told the Detroit Free Press in 2002. Those lessons resonated with young Ben, who grew up in an impoverished town that bears the name of an old slave plantation. Whether it was working cotton fields, walking to school barefoot when his shoes no longer fit, or hunting with his siblings to provide meat for the family, Wallace had no choice but to work for everything as a youngster.
Well, the average kid, parents might go to the grocery store. My mom might go to the store and come back with a box of 12-gauge shells. Go get something. And we go hit the woods. Come back with some rabbits, some squirrels, some deer, whatever. Eat off the land.
He even worked for his fledgling basketball career, as between his junior and senior years at Central High School, where Wallace was all-state in basketball, football, and baseball, the 16-year-old offered $3 haircuts on his porch in order to raise the $50 entry fee to attend then Knicks big man Charles Oakley's camp. With the money raised, Wallace made the 100-mile trip west to York, Alabama, and took part in the camp. That trip and those haircuts would launch a Hall of Fame career. After being called out by Oakley for not paying attention one day in the camp, Wallace's punishment was playing the bruising NBAer in a game of one-on-one. Though the game left the teenager with a split lip, Wallace's relentlessness also left an indelible mark on Oakley, who took the youngster under his wing.
Well, I had an opportunity to meet Oakley, and when I was in high school, he had a basketball camp in Alabama. He said, if I continue to play with the type of heart and passion I have for the game, if I continue to play like that, then good things will happen for me as far as my basketball career.
When no big-name colleges recruited Wallace, he enrolled at a community college in Oakley's hometown of Cleveland, eventually transferring to Oakley's alma mater, historically black university and D2 school, Virginia Union. As a 2021 NBA.com profile described, Oakley's old college coach was in need of a big man. Oakley recommended Wallace, stating, "He ain't that big, but he's a man." Scouts remained blinded by that lack of traditional size, even as the 6'8" center averaged a double-double, led Virginia Union to the D2 Final Four, and earned D2 first-team All-American honors.
First leave from Alabama going to Ohio, that was a big adjustment. And coming here, everything just sort of slowed down and fell in place.
Feel comfortable?
Yeah, I feel very comfortable.
In a legendary 1996 draft class that featured a who's who of future superstars, though, it turns out NBA teams weren't looking at undersized Division II centers. There were so many guys in there, eventually you had to miss somebody, an always humble Wallace told NBA.com about going undrafted. When a summer league stint with the Celtics led nowhere, the product of a small Alabama town departed for southern Italy, where Wallace tried out for and played one game for Viola Reggio Calabria. The Washington Bullets came calling next, as then GM Wes Unseld knew a thing or two about being able to cut it in the association as a shorter center who didn't lack for strength. The Bullets invited Wallace to training camp, where the big man survived the last cut, He went on to log less than 200 minutes in 34 appearances as a rookie, while earning less than $300,000. Still, as Wallace had proven at every stage of his basketball journey, all he needed was a foot in the door, and Washington gave him that opportunity. His hard work and defensive prowess would take care of the rest. Wallace became a rotation mainstay for a 42-win team that had rebranded as the Wizards in 1997-98. He even earned a starting job by the end of his sophomore season, during which he averaged over a block per game for the first of 14 consecutive seasons. Wallace remained defensively productive during his third season in Washington and after a 1999 trade to Orlando, where he became a full-time starter for the first time in his career. But players averaging 4 points per game through their first 4 years in DC and Orlando, without a playoff appearance to their name, don't exactly demand attention. That would soon change. With the Pistons set to lose franchise star Grant Hill in free agency, Detroit agreed to a sign-and-trade with the Magic in order to salvage something from their loss. In acquiring Wallace as part of that seemingly debilitating deal, the Pistons actually laid the foundation of a future championship defense. In averaging more than 13 rebounds, 2 blocks, and a steal during the 2000-2001 campaign, Wallace finished 5th in Defensive Player of the Year voting and 9th in Most Improved voting, the first of 7 straight seasons he'd finished top 6 in the former. Though the Pistons failed to make the playoffs, it was obvious they had found a keeper in their new starting center. With Wallace emerging as the league's very best defender and Jerry Stackhouse leading the way on the offensive end, Detroit exploded for 50 wins in 2001-2002. Wallace's star turn that season was incredible. On top of winning his first of 4 Defensive Player of the Year awards, Wallace finished 10th in MVP voting, runner-up in Most Improved Player voting, and earned an All-NBA third-team selection. Though his scoring remained modest, Wallace became just the 4th player to lead the league in rebounding and block shots, joining Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bill Walton, and Hakeem Olajuwon. During a February loss to Milwaukee, he recorded a triple-double with blocks. In his postseason debut, he poured in 19 points, 20 rebounds, 3 blocks, and 3 steals.
Corliss Williamson misses and Wallace follows with a jam, 19 points and 20 rebounds.
The Pistons would fall to Paul Pierce's Celtics in the Eastern Conference semifinals, but Wallace had established himself as the rare breed of defensive difference maker who could serve as a franchise pillar. Detroit remade its roster during the 2002 offseason, trading Stackhouse to Washington for fellow 20-point scorer Richard "Rip" Hamilton, drafting versatile forward Tayshaun Prince, and signing journeyman guard Chauncey Billups, adding 3 no-nonsense, hard-nosed grinders. This team has been built in the image of Ben, for sure, Pistons great-turned-general manager Joe Dumars told Hoop magazine in 2003. Unsurprisingly then, the Pistons kept working, climbing, and proving the naysayers wrong. With Wallace averaging a career-high 15.4 rebounds and continuing to revolutionize what help defense looked like, the new-look Pistons once again rattled off 50 wins, this time advancing all the way to the 2003 East Finals, where they were swept by Jason Kidd's Nets. Despite averaging less than 7 points per game, Wallace once again finished top 10 in MVP voting, earning his first second-team All-NBA selection, and took home another Defensive Player of the Year award. He also became the first player since Kareem 27 years earlier to average at least 15 rebounds and 3 blocks in a season. No player has achieved the feat since. For his tireless efforts, Wallace earned his first All-Star selection that year, becoming the first undrafted All-Star starter. That 2003 All-Star debut was a heavy one for Wallace though, as Sadie died less than a week before the game.
Our hearts go out to Ben Wallace. It's been a very tough week for the young Detroit Pistons center because he had planned to get here Thursday and enjoy everything that goes along with All-Star Weekend. Last weekend, his mother Sadie died, and so he spent last weekend in Alabama, Whitehall, Alabama to be exact, spent the week there.
Though the individual accolades were appreciated, the culmination of everything Wallace had worked for came in 2003-2004. With Rasheed Wallace now sharing the front court with Big Ben, the Pistons embarked on an unforgettable playoff run that saw Detroit upset the heavily favored Lakers in the NBA Finals.
I talked to a lot of writers who cover the NBA, talked to the folks in Las Vegas. The Pistons, I have not seen picked to win the series anywhere.
Wallace averaged 10.3 points, 14.3 rebounds, 2.4 blocks, 1.9 steals, and 1.9 assists during the championship run, with his inspiring work in a finals matchup against Shaquille O'Neal particularly memorable.
Their season unraveling in this series. Detroit ends it on a high note, and they just add exclamation point after exclamation point.
We never double-teamed Shaq much or hack-a-Shaq, Pistons head coach Larry Brown told NBA.com. Ben's actually about 6'8". Shaq was over 7 feet, and at that time over 300 pounds. But Ben ran him on every play, tried to defend him on every play. And as great as Shaq was, he was not as good in the third or fourth quarter like he was in the first half, because of Ben's energy and how hard he played on every play. Wallace tallied 18 points and 22 rebounds in the Game 5 clincher. With Big Ben serving as their anchor, the 2004 Pistons finished the postseason with the lowest defensive rating of any playoff team in history, minimum 5 games played. Months later, Wallace found himself on the cover of NBA 2K5. It's not often a defensive player corralling a rebound serves as cover image material for a basketball video game. But such was the influence and mystique of Big Ben's presence in the middle during that era. Wallace would later have his own signature shoe under Stephon Marbury's Starbury line, with a pair retailing for less than $15.
You can't save the world, but as long as you can help a couple of people along the way, then that means a lot. You can really, help some young kid out who really can't afford to buy the high-end sneakers, but they can still go in the store with $15 and come out with a great pair of shoes.
Detroit's title defense could have been derailed long before their loss in a 7-game epic against San Antonio in the 2005 finals. As early in the 2004-2005 season, the Pistons and Pacers were involved in what came to be known as the Malice at the Palace. The brawl, which eventually spilled into the stands after a fan in Detroit threw a drink at Pacers forward Ron Artest, began with a skirmish between Artest and Wallace.
12, all 5 starters in double figures. The Pacers have played a very intelligent game tonight.
Ben Wallace is fouled, and Wallace did. Wallace right at Artest. This has potential to be serious if they don't get between. Wallace upset. Players trying to hold each other off. Steven Jackson and Rasheed Wallace trying to be peacemakers. Now Jackson yelling. Wallace still going. You need the coaches in there to get him away.
Wallace's 6-game suspension was the longest of any Piston involved, as it was the Pacers who had their title hopes dashed by lengthier bans. However, Wallace's brother David received a year of probation and community service for punching Pacer Fred Jones in the stands. The Pistons responded to their heartbreaking 2005 finals loss by ripping off a league-leading 64 wins, 12 more than any other East team in 2005-2006, with Wallace earning his 4th and final Defensive Player of the Year award and playing all 82 games for the first time in his career. After surviving a 7-game second-round series against the young LeBron James and his Cavaliers, the Pistons stared down an East Finals rematch with Shaq and Dwayne Wade's Heat. Though Wallace did record a memorable block on O'Neal during the matchup, the series was a largely forgettable one for Big Ben, who was benched for the 4th quarter of Miami's Game 6 clincher by new head coach Flip Saunders. That coaching decision fueled Wallace's exit for the rival Bulls in 2006 free agency, a choice previously considered unthinkable in Motown. The extra $4 million per year Chicago was offering didn't hurt either, as Wallace signed a 4-year, $60 million contract after having earned roughly $36 million total over the first 10 years of his career. It turned out not even winning a championship for Detroit was enough to ease the pain of fleeing for a long-hated division rival, as the Pistons' plan to honor Big Ben in his first return to the Palace was spoiled by a chorus of boos.
First, at center, please welcome the player that served as the cornerstone of the reemergence of the Detroit Pistons basketball. From Virginia Union University, Ben Wallace.
Wallace remained defensively productive in his debut season as a Bull, once again averaging double-digit rebounds and multiple blocks, while earning all defensive second-team honors and finishing 6th in Defensive Player of the Year voting. He even helped the Baby Bulls win their first playoff series of the post-Jordan era, gaining a measure of revenge against the defending champion Heat in the process. But what followed had to sting, as Chicago fell to Detroit in a 6-game second-round series. A disappointing lottery-bound Bulls team the following year traded Wallace to Cleveland at the 2008 deadline, with Big Ben's next mission being that he was expected to help get LeBron's Cavs over the hump. Though Wallace helped boost Cleveland's defense while playing power forward in a jumbo front court besides Zydrunas Ilgauskas, the Cavs fell short against the eventual champion Celtics in the East semis. That season represented the beginning of the end for Wallace, as he failed to average double-digit rebounds for the first time in 8 years. Injuries limited him the following year, and by the time the 2009 playoffs rolled around, the veteran had lost his starting spot.
What are the fans going to say? That they want the old Ben Wallace back?
I am the old Ben Wallace. They want the young Ben Wallace back.
After mulling retirement, getting traded to Phoenix in exchange for Shaq, and being waived by the Suns, Detroit's prodigal son returned home, signing a late summer deal with the Pistons. Wallace's impact continued to wane on woeful Pistons teams over the next 3 years, but watching him play out the remainder of his career in Detroit just felt right. The 37-year-old even suited up for 62 of a possible 66 games during the lockout-shortened 2011-2012 campaign, the final season of his career.
It's a given, Ben. Give them what they want. Give them what they want.
The crowd roars. We're going to see Ben one more time. Listen to the guard. It's a standing ovation. I got to get up myself.
By the time he called it quits, Wallace ranked 60th all-time in games played. Not bad for an undrafted D2 player who was supposed to be too small for the rigors of life as an NBA center. Wallace credited that longevity to lessons he learned from Oakley decades earlier. Growing up, I wanted to jump like Mike, dribble like Zeke, and shoot like Bird, Wallace told Hoop magazine in 2003. Not a whole lot of that happened for me, but Charles Oakley told me what to do instead. What Wallace would do as an NBAer is rewrite the modern defensive record books, joining Dikembe Mutombo as the only 4-time winners of the Defensive Player of the Year award. The 2004 champion also added 6 All-Defensive Team selections, 5 All-NBA selections, and 4 All-Star selections to his resume, with 2 rebounding titles to his name for good measure. Wallace is the only player in history with both more blocks than personal fouls and more steals than turnovers, generally impacting the game in ways his career scoring average of 5.7 points per game could never do justice. There's never been a player in our era that can impact the game like Ben does defensively, Saunders said in 2006. He can guard 5 guys on the floor, and sometimes he does it on one play. That scoring average is also the lowest of any Hall of Famer inducted solely for his playing career, which Wallace deservingly was in 2021.
Well, life didn't give me a chance from the start. I kept fighting, I kept winning, I kept succeeding. I tell you my legacy. I wasn't welcome. I was too small. I couldn't play the game the way they wanted me to play the game. Sound like an uneven game to me. Put me on a level playing field, and I'll show you.
That same year, Wallace, who by then was working as a team advisor, served as the Pistons' representative and good luck charm at the 2021 draft lottery, where Detroit won the '1 overall selection. Even without that result, though, Wallace had by then ensured he would never be booed in the Motor City again. Pistons fans, just like the countless opponents Wallace terrified, remember all too well what it meant to have Big Ben manning the middle. When that gong rang out, or rather when that bell tolled, it meant trouble for the visitors and euphoria for Detroit. Thanks for watching. If you like this video and want to see more content like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button.